Sync up in 3, 2, 1. Wes Goldberg, cold open question of the day is related to betting. Okay, I placed 3 bets for the November 6th slate of NBA games. So by the time people listen to this, they'll know what I was wrong about, basically. All these are from BetMGM, our sponsor. We'll get to after the break. I just wanted your feedback on these, and if you like these or not, or which one you like the best, perhaps. I went Charlotte -1.5 at -110 against the Pistons. Went the Raptors to cover at +11.5 against the Kings. And I went the Lakers and Grizzlies game under 230.5 combined points at -108. Which of those bets do you think I have the best chance of getting right?
Kind of like that Raptors pick for you. The Raptors have been a little bit feisty this year. I think the Kings are coming off of a little bit of a tough trip. So, that first game back at home is could sometimes be a weird one. You know what I mean? And so, Toronto. I like that one for you.
I like the Grizzlies, the Raptors much more than I thought I was going to coming into the year, and that's even with Scotty Barnes just out.
Yep. Grady Dick has filled that role nicely. He's averaging 21 points per game. He's shooting like +40% from 3.
Yeah, he's been quite good. I think RJ Barrett as a passer has given them something I didn't know he really had in his game. Like, it's just like a more functional team and competitive team than I was expecting. So shout out to the Toronto Raptors. But on today's show, it's take time. Lakers take, Grizzlies take, Nuggets take. All Western Conference edition of the Just Basketball Show. Let's go. What is up, everyone? Chris Manning here from the Just Basketball Show with my co-host, Wes Goldberg. If you haven't already, please follow, rate, review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. And check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. And Wes, you're going to tell everyone first about our friends at BetMGM.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code JustBasketball and you'll get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android. Sign up using the code JustBasketball. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, maybe the Toronto Raptors game. You'll receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply.
Also got to tell you about our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and popular culture. Use our link below, make your purchase, and support the Just Basketball Show. One of the coolest things they have right now are a bunch of NBA starter jackets. You can go check those out right now. They have Cavs ones, they have Celtics ones, and they also just did a really cool, I say this despite not being a member of the Boston media mafia. They have a very, very cool Boston Celtics 18-time champion starter jacket that is just like an incredibly cool jacket that if I was a Celtics fan, immediate buy. No hesitation. So. But Wes, you actually outed yourself as a member of the Boston media mafia like a month ago, so I feel like this jacket needs to be like
no.
On the way to your doorstep as you get ready to move up to Boston. All right, let's get into takes. Wes, you have a Lakers take, so let's start there with. Frankly, I will say we've talked about the Lakers a lot. I have found them not like in a forced way, but I have found them insanely compelling. So I'm kind of glad you have another Lakers take here.
The Lakers need to make a trade, and they need to do it soon. How's that for a take? Right off the top rope. Let's get started. Trade season.
We need some sound. We need something for that.
Here we go. Trade time. Let's go. Look, the Lakers are 4-3. By no means do they have to panic, but they have come back down to earth after a hot start, after a very impressive start to the year. And there's some really troubling signs here that we can kind of get into. But the number one thing I'm looking at is their defensive rating. They're 25th in defensive rating. Their offense is just fine. It's mostly buoyed by their getting to the line. They're first in free throw attempts at nearly 30 per game. That's what's going to happen when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis and you're the Lakers. It's just going to happen on your team. But again, other troubling numbers that we can get into here in a second, but their defense is just bad, and I don't think that they have the personnel to fix it. And I think as much as JJ Redick has done to help that team, and you and I talked about the better vibes around that team. I think after the first week of the season, when we did our overreactions on the first week, was wow, JJ Redick is a good coach, and I still believe that he is. But I don't know that he's good at coaching defenses just yet to the point where he can make the most out of not very much. And right now, the Lakers roster just doesn't have very much defensive talent. They're allowing 54.3 points in the paint this season. That's 27th in the NBA. And that makes sense, right? There's not a lot of friction at the point of attack for them, right? D'Angelo Russell's not, he's letting guys go by him. Gabe Vincent has not been great for them. When they go to guys like Max Christie or Dalton Connect, like those guys just aren't defensively what you need there. And then, behind Anthony Davis, it's Jackson Hayes, who's not very good and not giving them very good minutes. LeBron James has maybe been turning in his worst defensive season of his career. He's just not caring on that end. As a low man, he vanishes, and he's not providing a lot of help there. So I think that they just need to recast the roster here a little bit. They have that one first-round pick. And the reason I say they need to do it now is because there are good vibes happening right now in Los Angeles with the Lakers. Like, all that stuff is good. That stuff goes away really quick. It goes away really quick. And the Bronny James story is nice. I don't know that it's enough to keep LeBron James happy. And if LeBron James gets upset, and if he's looking around and saying, look, I could do all this stuff, but I need y'all to step up defensively, and those teammates aren't doing it, we know what a LeBron James team does, right? LeBron looks around that locker room and he starts figuring out who doesn't fit in for a team that needs to compete in the Western Conference. I think this team has the bones to compete in the Western Conference, but it does need to make some adjustments. And I think it needs to happen sooner rather than later because the West is stacked, Chris, and they can't afford to lose any ground. And I think there's a number of trade targets out there that we can get to here. I have some fake trades that I want to throw your way here in a second, but doing it now, at least it makes sure that you get those trade targets who I think would be ideal fits for them. And you do it soon enough to the point where you can start climbing up the standings in the West, because I do think seeding is going to matter, especially in the Western Conference where one game, I mean, you drop a couple of games and you might be in the play-in tournament, right? And we saw how close the Lakers were to getting dropped in the play-in tournament last year. So I think they need to make a trade. I think they need to do what they can to keep the good vibes alive, and I also think they need to do what they can to improve the obvious holes in that roster. Why am I wrong? Why is it too early to start talking trade?
I don't think you're wrong is sort of the problem. I think particularly with Anthony Davis having this foot issue, your defense becomes more vulnerable when that guy who was the main reason their season started off so incredibly, I think that always, him having any bumps, any bruises, which is kind of inevitable with him, was always going to be a real issue. That was always going to be a thing that came up, Wes. And you throw in some of the losses they've had, it adds up. I also think this was always a team that we felt like needed a trade, is the other thing. It's not like we are overreacting to a sample and saying, oh, this roster was actually not good enough. I think we all thought coming into the year, even if we had some optimism after the first stretch of games, that the Lakers were going to have to make a trade. And it's the defense is one reason, but then I also get the three-point shooting for them. And it's just not a recipe for success, in the modern NBA more broadly. It just isn't. And then secondly, around LeBron and AD specifically, if those are your two pillars, you need spacing. Even with JJ Redick, I think really being a friendly coach in the sense of shooting and believing in all of that and believing in spacing and believing in the good shots. The Lakers are 29th in three-point rate. There is a 20% gap between them and Boston and Minnesota and Charlotte and the teams at the top of the league in terms of three-point rate. They're even like 10% beyond the middle of the pack. Like, they are just in the doldrums as far as getting up threes. And that's Chris, a math problem. Yeah.
When you combine the three-point shooting rate with the fact that they play at one of the slowest paces in the NBA, the Lakers are the only team in the league not getting up 30 three-point attempts per game. They're at 29.7, right? I think Toronto might be 29th, and they're getting just over 30, up over 30 a game. That's a real problem, to your point, especially if you're a Lakers like JJ Redick, who wants to get those three-point shots up. And we saw signs of that at the start of the year. Those first couple of games of the season when they looked great, they were getting wins. against Minnesota, getting wins against Phoenix. They start 3-0 with a win against Sacramento, and they were getting those 3-point shots up, and they were hitting them at enough of a clip. But yeah, they're too free throw driven, which, as you know, when you have AD and LeBron, there is a certain floor that's pretty high in terms of how often you're going to get to the line, but that's still not the best way. You can't rely on basically the official blowing the whistle to generate your offense. And I think LeBron has shown a little bit of a decline here. He's still great, but he can't carry your offense. Here's another crazy stat, Chris. They're losing the LeBron James minutes this season.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's not by a lot. It's about 2.6 points per game. They're losing the LeBron James minutes. But they have been outscored in the minutes that LeBron James is on the court. Considering how thin that roster is, you have to win the minutes when LeBron and AD are out there. And I don't really know that like LeBron James defensively is giving up a lot. He's probably giving up more than what he's creating offensively or something close to it. But if you can bracket him with those top line defenders, I do think that LeBron and AD are enough offensively for you. If you're getting stops on one end and you're able to play in the full court a little bit more, there is a version of this. And they are still, again, 6th in offensive rating. Offense isn't the issue. It's defense that's dragging them down. And they need to make those fixes because I don't think those fixes exist on this roster right now.
I think also, Wes, you look at this and you just think about like who if their goal at the end of the year is contend. I think with LeBron and AD, with LeBron through his career, like that's always going to be your, realistic or not, like that's always going to be your benchmark of what we deem as successful or not, and to some degree. I think there's a chance that this version of them could still be much more dangerous than I thought coming into the year. I don't think this version of them, with the way the defense playing, with the 3-point rate, can't keep up with the big dogs of the West. And if there is any slippage, if AD misses 2 weeks, if LeBron misses time, if they're shooting about average from 3 right now in terms of percentage, if that dips and the margins just like you already have these thin margins and the margins get even thinner, their path to victory in some of these games against good teams becomes really hard. I mean, losing to Detroit the way they did kind of told you some of that, right? Like if they had a little more oomph offensively and the defense a little more, like you just win a game like that if your team's just kind of more put together and cohesive. So I agree, and it feels just like the obvious guy is just trading D'Angelo Russell. The problem is like how many assets are you attaching to do that? Like there is two. I will say, like, if there is something I would think about in terms of Pelinka and whatnot, there is a balancing act here, right? Like there is a real balancing act as far as not giving up too much for your future and hurting yourself 3 years down the road for a 2% better chance at the title, but also like needing to do right by LeBron and AD in this current moment. There is like a weird balance there to find.
And like I said, I think their bones of this thing is good. They just need to fix a little bit of the things on the edges here. And I do think that this team can compete in the West. And I don't know that the goal necessarily should be, does this trade make us the favorites in the Western Conference? Because there's no trade that's going to make that happen, right? Like you're not going to have a better roster by the trade deadline than the Oklahoma City Thunder or even Dallas or maybe Minnesota for that matter. But you can give yourself a chance. And when you have LeBron and AD, especially with Anthony Davis playing at an MVP level, that's the job. That's the job as a general manager. Make sure that your team has a chance. And right now, I don't think that this team has that chance. The problem with this roster, the way that it is now, Rui Hachimura hasn't really panned out. He's very hit or miss on any given night. Some nights, like, he can win you a quarter, right? And a quarter can win you a game. Other nights, he's just sort of a no-show, and you never really know which Rui Hachimura you're getting. I like Rui Hachimura for the record. I don't know that you can rely on him to the extent that they're relying on him. And then really everybody else on this team, other than Austin Reeves, is sort of a one-way player. Like D'Angelo Russell, offensive player, not a defensive player. Jared Vanderbilt, who still hasn't played for them right now, defensive player, not giving you anything on offense. And Dalton Connect, offensive player, not really a defensive player. And by the way, on the Dalton Connect front, is he already their best bench guy?
Which is concerning because
it's not Jackson Hayes.
Yeah,
Gabe Vincent has been a mess for them.
Bad. Yeah, and then even Connect, it's like he's a rookie and he's going to be erratic at times. Like, and rookies are not good for the most part. Rookies are not actually good. They can have good moments, but they're not actually good yet.
So I've got 3 trades that I want to throw your way. The first one is the obvious one. You got to go get those Brooklyn Nets guys. Save those good Brooklyn Nets players. Go get Dorian Finney-Smith.
Hey,
Maybe
save the Brooklyn Nets for themselves. Brooklyn Nets with the
Right.
I'm looking at this now, like a good offense. Jordy Fernandez doing the thing. They're a little feisty.
So Dorian Finney-Smith is a natural fit on this roster. He could slide into that Rui Hachimura spot, and Hachimura actually I think would be pretty nice for them as sort of their super six-man sub. But and then obviously gives you everything defensively, the corner threes, everything you want out of that spot. Dennis Schroeder has been good for Brooklyn. He's probably been better than D'Angelo Russell has been for the Lakers. If you can get him in that deal, that would be nice. And then Day'Ron Sharpe, not the best backup center in the league, but probably projecting better than Jackson Hayes. And you could take a shot at him. So ask for those three guys, trade them D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, Christian Wood's salary, or one of those other smaller salaries, and that first round pick, and you can get 3 rotation players back. I think that's fair for Brooklyn. And I think that's a nice deal for the Lakers to fill out the rest of their rotation. I've got 2 more trades, but any other notes on the Brooklyn deal?
No, I mean I love that. It's giving like 2018 Cavs of just let's get competent NBA players in here and patch some holes and let it ride. And I don't think I think that is an underrated type of trade a team can make.
The other obvious one that I didn't include on my list is trading for Jonas Valanciunas from Washington. I think that's going to be a little bit harder than the Lakers want, just because, A, Valanciunas is on a 3-year, $30 million deal, and that's fine, but the Wizards also have no reason to trade him now for anything less than market value, and so that means that the Lakers are going to have to attach that first-round pick. And Valanciunas for, like, Jared Vanderbilt's salary and a first-round pick, that's too much, right? Like, trading a first that's too much for Jonas Valanciunas. And then you kind of try to figure out, okay, let's cobble together a bigger deal. Like, can we get Malcolm Brogdon back? I don't know that Malcolm Brogdon's going to play this year. I don't know that helps them. So, there's not really that extra thing that you would probably want coming back unless you start constructing some giant like Kyle Kuzma deal, which could be pretty interesting, especially if the Wizards are post Kuzma with this lineup that they're playing. So I couldn't really figure that, like, the real construction of that deal out, but I wanted to throw that sort of concept of a plan out there. Chicago, Nikola Vucevic, a little bit of a bounce back, shooting over 40% from 3 this year. He's 10 rebounds per game. I don't hate that in Los Angeles. Add some size. You can move Anthony Davis to the 4, and that solves some of your other issues there. If you can get Ayo Dosunmu out of Chicago, that would be a huge win. That guy's a two-way player, ace defender, can hit open threes. I think he'd be a perfect fit for this roster. And then a guy like Jalen Smith, who it feels like Chicago signed not to trade necessarily, more as an experiment, but he's probably better than Jackson Hayes, which isn't saying much. But go get those 3 guys. Trade Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Christian Wood. Do you need the first-round pick in there if you're bailing the Chicago Bulls out of that Vucevic contract? I don't know.
I think maybe, but I think you try to negotiate it so you don't, or at least like throw some crazy protections on it. Like maybe that's the compromise there, or say, hey, this is going to be top whatever protected, where it's probably going to turn into 2 seconds, but you can put in the press release you got a first from us for Vooch.
Yeah, and I like Hachimura and Jalen Hood-Schifino as bets for Chicago. Those guys make sense for that roster. That team wants to be bigger, wants to get out and run. Hachimura would thrive, I think, in that kind of fast-paced Chicago Bulls environment where he can get out in the open court. We've seen what he can do in those moments. And Hood-Schifino, I think, is a nice little buy low, bet for the Bulls to take. And he sort of fits that rangy playmaking guard like Josh Giddey and Lonzo Ball, so they obviously like that type of player. So I don't know. I don't even think you need to include the first round pick. Last one, Lakers trade D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, and Max Christie and a first to Toronto for Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk.
Ooh, that is really betting big on a Bruce Brown comeback, because Bruce Brown post Nuggets has not really felt like the same player. Is that fair?
Yep. No, that's totally fair. He's not exactly been healthy either. But if Bruce Brown is playing off of star players, that's where he thrives. And in Toronto, he's not playing off of star players. I actually didn't think he was that bad with the Pacers. They just moved him for this in the Siakam deal, which was the right thing to do for them. But if I could see him just being a defensive pest I don't like the deal as much as the other ones because also Kelly Olynyk, just every team feels like, it's that meme of it hasn't worked for them, but maybe it'll work for us kind of deal. But he's an upgrade versus what they have and can theoretically play with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, which might be the most important thing. So, but yeah, that was I had that one third for a reason.
I'm going the Nets trade is my favorite one.
Yep.
That's the one. It's just get the guys that you know are going to fit perfectly. It's not going to cost too much, and you move forward. And you don't. And if you need to do something bigger, like a Jeremy Grant trade down the line or something, you theoretically could still find a way to do that. I think that would be reasonable for both parties, just to do something a little bit smaller, a little tweak like that.
Yep.
Where would that put you in terms of your optimism on them, Wes? Before we go to my take, but if they were to do that trade exactly, and their rotation's little rebuilt, and you look at what the West is like, would you put them as like a safe from the play-in team? Like, where do you end up having them after that?
If they did the Nets trade, it would be their lineup would be Schroeder, Austin Reeves, LeBron, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Anthony Davis with Daron Sharp and I don't know, Dalton Connect coming off the bench. It's still a little flimsy to me. I still think you're probably another guy, specifically a wing short. But, you would have Hachimura coming off the bench, which, again, I kind of like him in that role. So it still feels you're probably one guy short, but I like it a lot more than where they're at. So, yeah, I think I would probably have them out of the play-in tournament, which is, I think, the goal for the record. If you're the Lakers and you're making trades, let's just make sure we're not in the play-in tournament, and then just get LeBron and AD in the playoffs, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, they also just them being able to find find a random G League guy for them is like really the hack here. It's like,
and I don't know why teams don't just poach guys off of Sioux Falls or the Oklahoma City Blue. All those guys end up panning out. Just go sign those, find the position you need, and pick the best one on one of those rosters.
Yeah, stop paying Jackson Hayes any money and get a center from the G League, and you might be better off. It's not a bad way to look at it. I like this take, West. Lakers need to make a trade. All right, before we get into a Memphis Grizzlies take, center on Ja Morant. Got to tell you about our friends at eBay. eBay has been a fantastic partner for our podcast network this year, partnering with just baseball on 3 incredible events from spring trading to the All-Star Game to Wild Card Weekend. And we want to shout out the new Gametime Gets collection, along with career benchmarks, league-wide records, single-game achievements that will trigger them to drop. You can find these at ebay.com/GameTimeGets, with bidding for each card starting at 24 cents as an homage to the game's 24-second shot clock. That's a great way for you to get at these cards. I mean, they have a ton of great ones. All your favorite players are going to be featured there. One I quite like that I think could happen this year just because I still believe in him is Cade Cunningham getting 10 assists in a game. That just feels like something that is going to happen. And if you're a Pistons fan and believe in what's going on there, maybe that's the card for you. And they also have WNBA ones, by the way. If you're interested in that, getting ahead for next season, you can bookmark some of those and stay on the lookup. But check them out at ebay.com/GameTimeGets. Wes, the Memphis Grizzlies. It's about Ja Morant. And Ja Morant is back like he never left. Ja Morant is doing 360 layups. He's playing with swagger. He is playing free. He, for better or for worse, and I think mostly for the better, everything that went on last year just doesn't feel like it is really hindering him. It isn't holding him back. I like that they're limiting his minutes so far. Certainly some efficiency for him to get a little bit better, but the way he is attacking the basket, the way he is approaching the game of basketball, it feels like the Ja Morant that made 2 All-Star games and I think has always been thought of as maybe this is a guy that could win an MVP in a random year just if he puts up big numbers. This is one of the most electrifying players in the game, and he is, even if the exact results aren't yet, even if Memphis is still, I think, figuring out everything as of right now, and I say that despite the fact that they're 10th in net rating and 7th in offense, and have a tough win differential right now in terms of expected win differential, where they actually probably should be a little bit better. They should be like 5-3 instead of 4-4, which Matt says something at this point of the year. I think Ja Morant is playing like he never left, and I think long term this bodes well for what Memphis is going to get up to this year, even if it's been a 500 start.
So I think I halfway agree with you on this because anecdotally, eye test wise, he looks great, man, and that's all you can ask. Like, he doesn't look like he's out of shape. which can happen when you're away from the team and away from the game as long as he was. If you don't have your wind, if you're just kind of off the speed of the game, off the rhythm. No, that guy's still, you watch him in the Grizzlies play, he's still very much in control of the pace of the game, which was always one of the most impressive parts of Ja Morant's game prior to everything that happened last year was when Ja Morant was in the game, it was a Ja Morant game. Like you felt him, and that hasn't gone away, and that's to me huge. But the numbers aren't quite there yet, right? Like first of all, he's not playing a ton of minutes. I think that's part of maybe that is certainly part of Memphis's plan here to make sure that he doesn't sort of get overtaxed too soon. It's not too much too soon for him. He's only averaging about 28 minutes per game so far, where if you look at his, all-star and all-NBA type years, he was obviously, 32, 33 minutes per game. So if you look at his per 36 numbers, his scoring is still slightly down, right? This is a guy who averaged about 30 points per 36 minutes. He's at 26 points per 36 minutes. Not bad, but a little down. And I don't know that Memphis can afford for him to be down, right? Especially as Desmond Bane is dealing with injury issues seemingly all the time and all these other things. And, Marcus Smart is out and that the depth on that team just feels a little bit thinner than it has in past years. His field goal percentage, though, is also down. His three-point percentage, he's only making 21% of his threes right now. But you expect all those things to bump up. He hasn't shot better than 30% since basically his last All-Star year. He was even below 30% in his limited time last year from three-point range. But you'd expect that stuff to go back up. His assist numbers are up, but his turnovers are also up. You'd like him to cut down on the turnovers a little bit more. Everything else is basically the same for him. But those are counting stats, and that's for the nerds to worry about. Like I said, when you're watching him play, it still feels like a Ja Morant game. And so is he back all the way back? Probably not, but I'd say he's 70% there. And that's a win if you're Memphis, right? Like all you wanted to know was that this guy wasn't going away. And he clearly isn't going away. He is working his way back.
Yeah, Ja Morant is on the right track to being back in all caps, right? Like he is going to be like exclamation point back at some point. He's also just clearly one of these guys who that is a star, and I think the league was in need of another dude with some juice. Say what you will about like social media views and whatnot, but like that guy generating like 160 million plus social media views for the 360 layups just tells you that the kids love him, that he is an absolute star. That he has something, and like when he is on and when he is getting praise from Durant and just being an audacious NBA player, the league's a more interesting place, and it makes the West more interesting. That like this is a team that I think everyone thought, okay, this is a good over bet. This is a team to get in the thick of it in the West this year. Maybe not on the level of OKC, but certainly can be uber competitive. There's something there, I think, bubbling with the way they've attacked this year so far, with the way Ja has looked. I think I've liked what I've seen from Edie. I think obviously this team has some bigger picture things to figure out as they get healthy and everything kind of normalizes. But I think as far as what we've seen, it's the right idea, right? Like, and I think to your point, that's all I really wanted from Ja in the first stretch of the season. I didn't need him to come out averaging 30 and having career high efficiency. I wanted him to approach things in the way that was indicative of where he's going, and that's what we're getting here. And if that ends up being true, I mean, Memphis feels like a top 4 or 5 team in the West, which is absolutely a real accomplishment with how good that conference is.
Yeah, and if you're looking at like a return of Memphis, you're looking for just sort of, okay, what are the notes that we have to hit? What are the same notes that we were playing a couple years ago when they were, routinely a 50-win team and near the top of the conference in the standings? And one of the things is, to your point, Ja Morant playing at an all-star, all-NBA level, which I think he's on his way to doing that, and by the end of the year, he should be there. They need to be healthy. Desmond Bane now 2 years in a row where he's just been unhealthy. What's going on with him? They got to get him back healthy. They're dealing with a number of different injuries to Vince Williams and a lot of other guys on that roster. Gigi Jackson, obviously he's hurt. Marcus Smart, like I already talked about. But some of those other notes are there, right? Like defensively, in defensive rating, they're right in the middle of the pack. But some of that is just due to three-point variance. Like opponents are shooting a pretty good percentage on their threes against Memphis. And so I think that's going to come down a little bit. And when that three-point percentage comes down due to the variance, that defensive rating should go up. A lot of this still is very small sample size that we're working with. If I could point out one concern, though, it's they are fouling too much. and
Yes.
opponents are getting to the line a lot. They need to bring those foul rates down. But the other thing I do like is that they're still near the top of the league in rebounding percentage, which was a foundational piece to what it was that they did in their peak years. And losing Steven Adams, it feels like that wasn't a big deal, and we're so far past that. But it was a big deal, right? Like when they had Valanciunas, when they had Steven Adams, when they had those guys, those are big dudes who just boxed out and improved their overall rebounding percentage. And I think that's why they drafted Zach Edey. They just knew that that was a foundational cornerstone part of the formula. And without that, maybe there's a world where you can go small and you're playing Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 more and you're playing a little bit more 5 out and all those things. But I think that would have been just too much dip on the chip right now when you're trying to work all these guys back in. Just kind of fall back to what works and then maybe experiment a little bit later. To Memphis's credit, they're 4th in rebounding percentage overall. That's huge for them. I'd like that defensive rebounding percentage to go up a little bit more, but their offensive rebounding percentage is very good. And a lot of that is Zach Edey, who's NBA.com does their weekly or bi-weekly or whatever poll of like top rookies, and he debuted at number 1, and for good reason. So he's been great for them. Jaren Jackson Jr. is hitting shots. I think he looks great. So yeah, there's a lot to like for Memphis. But that said, like the West is a little bit, not a little bit, a lot deeper than it was the last time we saw anything close to these Grizzlies. So based on what you've seen, have you seen enough from this Memphis team that makes you feel like, okay, this is definitely a team, like we talked about with the Lakers, like you just want to be out of the play-in mix in the West and then figure it out. Is this a team that you feel good about being one of the best 6 teams in the West right now?
I'm close, but one thing I am curious about is where their shot profile ends up, and this will maybe kind of tell me where I ultimately feel about their viability. Last year, obviously, kind of a different year because Ja plays just a handful of games. Their 3-point rate gets jacked way up last year, which I think ultimately was in some ways like a good thing. Every other year under Ja, they have like a pretty low 3-point frequency. This year, they're 27th. Their mid-range is back up again a little bit this year, which makes sense with Ja. And their rim's up, which makes sense with Edey, which makes sense with Ja. Can they find just like a little more balance and a little more stretch? And then I'll feel, I think, pretty good about it. I also just think I would lean yes, Wes, but it's going to really be, does Bane get healthy? Does Jaren Jackson, like, can he stay healthy and be an effective player? Like, I think does Brandon Clark, like, get into form? I don't really love how he has totally looked so far. Does Marcus Morgan? If they can be healthy and they just get a little more stretch, I'm going to say yes. But it could be an uphill battle if some of these, if they're not healthy. I mean, that in itself kind of maybe puts the nail in the coffin on that being a very solid belief.
Why aren't they? This is the part I don't figure out. And maybe again, this is just you don't want to put too much dip on the chip this early in the season. But why are they not calling up Brooklyn and just being like, yeah, we'll trade you for Dorian Finney-Smith. This is the guy that clearly works for that team. And Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson, those guys being out, they're asking a lot of Jake LaRavia, who's been fine for them to his credit, but like they need another wing, and they already felt shallow at wing. Like even when they were healthy, they were starting
Yes.
Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane. They were just a little too small out on the perimeter for my liking. Getting a guy like DFS to me just is an easy fit. That's why, like I'm saying, for the Lakers, go get that guy before another team goes and gets that guy, because that guy ain't gonna finish the year on Brooklyn, right? And if you're one of these contenders that need another big jumbo-sized defensive wing, he just makes so much sense for you. So I would be
and
even when Gigi Jackson went down, I was like, call Brooklyn. And then Vince Williams went down, and I was like, why are they not on the phone with Brooklyn right now?
There's no reason not to be, and I would rather be proactive with something like that than not.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like they've historically been, like, I guess ever since the Justice Winslow trade, it felt like they've never been super proactive in some of these moves, and maybe that was like a philosophy shift, except for like the reported offer from Mikal Bridges. But I would agree. I think you just go be proactive, and I would rather have in this West, if I'm the Lakers, if I'm the Grizzlies, if I'm any team that needs to make a trade, I would rather make the trade now and have more time to build up continuity than wait until February.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And win more games, because all these games are really going to matter. The Grizzlies have some chunky contracts that they can deal with here. maybe there's an opportunity to get off that Marcus Smart deal because he didn't look great when he was healthy. I don't know, but
Yeah, I didn't love that trade from the get go for them. If I'm
me
being
neither.
honest, it just felt like a little like I understood like the idea of it and like having Marcus Smart replace Dylan Brooks as like your gritty kind of like tone setter
Hmm.
guy, but positionally it wasn't perfect. And H curve wise, I don't think it was perfect either. All right, last take. Denver Nuggets have Aaron Gordon out multiple weeks with a calf strain. Jamal Murray is in the concussion protocol. And Wes, my Nuggets panic hasn't gone up. The other day we did panic meter, and they were not our winner. I think rightfully and still would be the Milwaukee Bucks for me. But I think now the pressure that we are back to what feels like a couple of years ago, where Jokic has to do everything to make this team hit its ceiling. And the reason, part of the beauty of their title season was that it all kind of felt like Jokic was doing everything, but he had like the maximum amount of support he could possibly get.
Hmm.
If that doesn't happen, I don't. It's asking so much of Jokic to carry everything, and if I'm Denver, that would scare me that they just haven't found a way to replicate that success and infrastructure around Jokic since then, and it just feels like they are going to be digging themselves out of a hole with these injuries and just with the way the season has started so far. Even if there's some things that are very nuggetsy still, like missing Aaron Gordon for a couple weeks is just a massive blow to them being the best version of themselves this year.
Yeah, they're eighth right now in the Western Conference. This is not a team that can afford to lose ground, and I know a lot of what Denver over the last few years has been more of sort of qualitative, right? If Jokic is playing at an MVP level, that starting five is still clicking in all cylinders, and we can just get enough from the bench, then we don't really care what our record is. And that's worked, right? They won the championship, and so the proof is there. But a lot of those things, to your point, there haven't been like they haven't checked those boxes, right? Like Jokic playing an MVP level, check. Everything else, not
Yeah.
checked. Not even close to checked. Like
It's a bunch of
they
blah.
they don't have a single player off that bench that I like. They have the worst bench in the NBA. It's not close. Besides Utah, who's actively trying to lose games, and even Denver's bench is slightly worse than Utah's, depending on what metrics you're looking at. There's not a player you like coming off that bench. Aaron Gordon's hurt. Jamal Murray has been out, is missing a couple of games with this concussion, but he should be back soon. Maybe as soon as tonight. I haven't seen the latest injury report, but they're this team is really shallow, and the only way they're going to win games is with their starting five on the court because they lose games when the bench plays, right? Like they're losing those minutes in a very major way. And so, look, I think you can afford you can. The problem is, yeah, I think the starting five will still work without Aaron Gordon because you still have Nikola Jokic. And once Jamal Murray comes back, I think everything will still work. That starting five will still outscore their opponents. The problem is, are they going to outscore their opponents by as much? And depending on who takes Aaron Gordon's place, that's one other player who you don't have coming off the bench. So you're even more shallow than you were before. And so this is a thin team that can't afford to get injured. Like they just
No.
can't. Now, fortunately for them, this is happening earlier in the year for them. But the more you stress the other guys on this roster, the more the more they're susceptible to injury. And if this happened in the playoffs, they're done, right? Like they're one injury in the playoffs away from just being eliminated. And this is going to give us a little bit of a look at what that looks like.
This should also be a Dorian Finney-Smith trade now team, and it's a
It
little
should
harder
be.
for them to do it.
Yeah.
This is really the Dorian Finney-Smith trade war pod, which we didn't plan, but it's really happened. They have a little bit of a harder path to doing any of these kind of trades. We'll see what they want to spend. But they had if it was so you have Zeke Naji on a salary you could do something with. You have to add another $6 million according to the trade machine to make that work.
Mhm.
Where are you finding another $6 million? Like, are you like?
It's hard.
Like, is it like it's Saric? Like, because there's even there's certain guys where even if I don't love them, I want them around for depth and like innings eating at a certain point and just like normal roster functionality. So like when you do make a trade and you have to you don't want to go get a ton of guys off the scrap heap. Like, is it? Once you get below Najee, it's like Saric at $5 million, Russ at 3.3, Christian Brown at 3, Deron Holmes at 3. Like you're getting into these like very minor salaries, which is like I understood the logic of that, and I largely like the idea of trying to build a roster that way. This is also the downside of not having some inflated numbers to make a single trade with. It's a hard place to be.
It is, right? And so a guy like Finney Smith is just hard. It's hard to get to that number. Like, and the other problem here too is let's say you even hypothetically move Zeke Naji, Dario Saric, and let's call it Deron Holmes a second. You have one first-round pick that you could trade if you're Denver, the 2031 first. It's the only pick that you could trade. Well, you've just traded 3 guys for 1 guy on a team that's already really thin. Like, there's no question Dorian Finney-Smith helps this team, but now you've got to give up 3 guys who were part of your, maybe not Deron Holmes, but like another salary, maybe potentially 3 guys who were part of your rotation anyway, and then you've got to replace those guys with minimum salaries. And this is an ownership group that has been notoriously cheap. They don't really want to spend more than what they're spending. And so there's a lot of questions there. So yeah, I think Zeke Naji, that's the right salary to call out here at $8.8 million. I don't know what team wants Zeke Naji though. That's not, I know it's a small contract, but he's still got 3 more years left on it after this one.
Exactly.
Like what team?
It's not. Yeah.
Can you attach Naji and in that 2031 first? Because if you're a team trading with Denver, you want the 2031 first, because that could be potentially very valuable. But then if you're Denver, you're not exactly getting a $20 million player back, right? Like if you're trading an $8.8 million salary, you're getting a player on an $8 million salary back. And those players aren't worth first-round picks. So, threading that needle is really difficult. And it's why I keep looking at Michael Porter Jr. as the guy that they probably need to trade, because they just have these 4 really expensive players between Porter, Gordon, Murray, and Jokic. But even Porter Jr. is been vitally important to this roster right now because of he's the only guy from 3-point range who you trust, at this point. And I'm including Jamal Murray just because he's so up and down lately. And so can you even afford to get rid of Michael Porter Jr. if you're not getting an ace 3-point shooter back? And again, I don't know what team is trying to trade for Michael Porter Jr. making $36 million a year, and he's got 2 more years left on that contract after this one. So it's really, really tough for Denver, man. I don't know what the fix is necessarily. Part of me wonders, like, do you start exploring Jamal Murray trades? Because that's, despite his up and downs, that's probably a guy who's more valuable. But you just re-signed him. It's hard to trade him. It's a big contract, and he's probably, for a guy who's never made an All-Star team, I don't know that there's a lot of teams that want Jamal Murray if he doesn't have Jokic to play off of. So it's not easy, man. It really isn't.
There's not like a clean path. Even if they wanted to make a lower end trade that would cost less, like say Jayshawn Tate just doesn't play for the Rockets. If you wanted to say, okay, he has a rough skill set of what we sort of need, can we try to like take a swing on a guy that's out of favor somewhere else? That's still $7.5 million that you need to get up. You need to get close to that. It's like a 2-for-1 with with like Russ and a $2.5 million guy. Like none of these trades are going to be simple for them. And then it just all goes back to like, okay, I agree with you on the Porter Jr. thing. I think he's also improved on defense. It shouldn't, I think, be undercited that I think in a macro sense, he's a better defender than he was a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But it's a little harder now just because of where salaries are at. But it's like, if you told me you could have 2 guys at his salary and the production's a little bit less, I'd probably take the 2 guys just because your roster has a little more balance and depth to it. But it's still, I think, ultimately then just goes back to, okay, how can Nikola Jokic just raise all the boats? Can he be the tie that raises all the boats and save them? That's where this ultimate thing ends up, no matter what they do, which is just, I think in the conference they're in, and I think where the league is at right now, I don't really think we can. I thought we had this talk when Brendan was still in the show with us that I thought maybe like the Luka team last year was an example of that. I think that take for me aged pretty poorly because that Mavericks supporting cast I actually have liked the more and more we've gone on. I think now I look at it and just say like Jokic and like inconsistency stuff everywhere else is just like I just don't know if it's enough.
You need one of those young guys to pop. I mean, we're talking around it, but between the Julian Struthers, the Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, like all these guys that Calvin Booth bet the farm on, like at least one of those guys has to pop to the point where you can afford to get rid of Russell Westbrook or Dario Saric and one of these guys. Like, fortunately for Denver, they have a lot of time between now and the playoffs, and they should be playing those young guys as much as possible to try to get those guys developed in time to maybe where they can make a Dallas Mavericks type of run this coming postseason. Maybe by April, those guys are ready to give you some real minutes, but right now they're not. Or I shouldn't say not ready, But right now they're not playing as well as you need them to. But I think hopefully you would bet, hey, by April maybe these guys are just playing a little bit better.
Yeah, weird place to be. Weird times for the Denver Nuggets. Let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. Back next week with more on the Just Basketball Show. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the hoops. Stay tuned to our other channels for more Just Basketball content in the coming days and weeks and months. Subscribe, please rate, review. Support our sponsors, eBay, Homage, and BetMGM. Talk to you next week.